Let's get straight to the point. The habit of people-pleasing isn't a sign of kindness. It's a form of self-abandonment. The psychologist Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding the human psyche, and his work reveals a startling truth. Every time you agree to something against your own will, you're not being virtuous. You are chipping away at your own soul. The very people you are so desperate to satisfy don't see your actions as strength. They don't respect your kindness. They become dependent on your lack of boundaries. Take a moment and picture a scene you know all too well. You've just said yes to a request that you wanted to refuse. A tight knot forms in your stomach, yet you manage to force a smile and nod. On the inside, a part of you is screaming in protest. You rationalize it, telling yourself you're just being helpful, cooperative, or the bigger person. But Jung would identify this as being trapped in a psychological prison of your own making, a prison built from the bars of your persona. This is the agreeable mask you wear for the world, and it has slowly become your cage. Jung explored for decades why individuals would sacrifice their own needs for the comfort of others. His conclusion changes everything. The moment you stop being a people-pleaser, you don't transform into a selfish monster. You transform into your real self. This transformation begins with a crucial understanding of why this pattern started. The origin has very little to do with a desire to be good and everything to do with a deep-seated survival instinct from your childhood. What Jung uncovered is that people-pleasing isn't a simple personality trait or a character flaw. It's a form of survival conditioning. This psychological programming starts when we are young, at a time when our authentic self, our true feelings, needs, and opinions was met with rejection. As Jung famously wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But for a people-pleaser, this privilege was never granted. Instead, they learned a different set of rules. Being real leads to being pushed away, having needs is selfish, and expressing anger is unacceptable. So, they adapted. They constructed what Jung termed the persona, a carefully polished mask designed to navigate the world without causing conflict, facing rejection, or experiencing abandonment. They learned to smile through their tears and say yes when their entire being screamed no. They became a chameleon, changing their colors to match whatever others required of them. Jung acknowledged that this persona is a brilliant survival tool, but he also saw its devastating hidden cost. When you become too identified with your mask, you lose the connection to your authentic core. You become what can be described as the empty vessel, someone universally liked but not genuinely known by anyone. The most tragic irony, as Jung discovered, is that chronic people-pleasing fails to deliver the love and connection it promises. It achieves the exact opposite. It fosters relationships built on utility, not authenticity. You become valued for what you do for others, not for who you are. But there's an even more insidious layer that Jung brought to light, explaining why this pattern is so hard to break. It operates like an addiction. Jung's shocking discovery was that people-pleasing follows the same pattern as a psychological addiction. You get a temporary high from the approval of others, but this feeling is fleeting. Consequently, you find yourself needing larger and more frequent doses of validation just to feel a sense of worth, trapping you in a relentless cycle. Here's how Jung saw this cycle eroding a person's true self. First, there's the trigger. Someone asks for a favor, needs your help, or even shows a hint of disapproval. Your nervous system immediately activates that old survival program. If I don't make them happy, they will abandon me. Then comes the fix. You instantly agree, offer your help, and push your own needs to the side. This provides a brief, intoxicating hit of relief. You feel safe, connected, and validated. But Jung observed that this relief is a mirage because it's earned through performance, not built on a real relationship. Next is the inevitable crash. The initial relief fades, replaced by resentment, exhaustion, and a profound sense of being invisible. You realize you've betrayed yourself yet again, But instead of questioning the pattern, you turn the blame inward, criticizing yourself for being too sensitive or selfish for feeling bad about helping. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The unconscious belief driving people-pleasing is the deeply buried conviction that your authentic self is inherently unworthy of love. Therefore, you believe love must be earned through constant service, compliance, and self-sacrifice. This is where Jung's insight becomes truly revolutionary. He found that this pattern doesn't just harm you, it actively prevents genuine intimacy. When you interact with people through your persona instead of your authentic self, you create what could be called hollow intimacy, relationships that look close on the surface but lack any real depth or understanding. Think about your own relationships. Do the people closest to you know your boundaries, your dislikes, your true emotional reactions? Or do they only know the curated version of you, the one who is always available, always understanding, and always agreeable? If it's the latter, Jung would argue, you're not truly in a relationship, you are in a performance. Tragically, people-pleasers often attract individuals Jung might describe as unconscious narcissists, people who need a partner to manage their emotions, carry their burdens, and never challenge their behavior. This creates a toxic symbiosis that can feel like love, but is, in reality, a form of mutual exploitation. Jung's most profound insight into people-pleasing relates to his concept of the shadow. All the parts of yourself you have disowned and rejected to maintain your agreeable image. This includes your anger, your needs, your boundaries, and your assertiveness. But here's the critical part most people miss. When you repress these authentic parts of yourself, they don't simply vanish. They gain strength in the darkness of your unconscious. Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." People-pleasers expend enormous energy condemning and suppressing their own authentic responses. This suppression leads to what can be called a shadow rebellion, where your repressed self begins to sabotage your carefully constructed persona from within. This rebellion manifests in several ways. It shows up as passive aggression. You agree to help, but you do it with a sigh or a grudging attitude. You smile on the outside while sending subtle signals of your true resentment. You become internally split. Your persona says yes, while your shadow screams no, creating a constant internal war. It shows up as chronic exhaustion. Jung understood that maintaining a false self is incredibly draining. When you're constantly policing your own reactions, managing the emotions of others, and suppressing your authentic impulses, you deplete your psychological and physical energy at a fundamental level. It shows up as mysterious illnesses. Jung was a pioneer in recognizing that psychological repression often manifests as physical symptoms. People-pleasers frequently suffer from unexplained headaches, digestive problems, autoimmune disorders, and chronic pain that doctors struggle to diagnose. Most devastatingly, it shows up as identity erosion. You become so adept at reading and adapting to others' needs that you lose touch with your own. You become a shapeshifter who has forgotten their true form. Jung observed that this internal split creates a dangerous dynamic. The more you suppress your authentic self, the more it will seek expression through unconscious, often explosive means. You might have sudden outbursts of anger that shock everyone, including yourself. You might make impulsive decisions that seem completely out of character. This is your shadow desperately trying to restore balance. But because you don't recognize these eruptions as legitimate parts of yourself, you feel shame and double down on your people-pleasing, creating an even more destructive cycle. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For the people-pleaser, making the darkness conscious means acknowledging the anger, resentment, and needs you've been hiding, not to become a cruel person, but to become a whole person. The question then becomes, how do you integrate this shadow without destroying your relationships or becoming the very person you've always tried to avoid? Jung's answer was a lifelong process he called individuation. This is the psychological journey of becoming who you truly are, beneath all the layers of conditioning. For a people-pleaser, this process can feel like dying because your entire identity has been built around being needed. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For you, self-acceptance means embracing the parts you were taught were bad, your anger, your needs, your boundaries, and your capacity to disappoint others." This is where Jung's perspective becomes life-changing. He realized that what people-pleasers label as selfishness is actually self-respect. What they call mean is actually honesty. What they call difficult is simply being authentic. The fear isn't about becoming a bad person. It's about discovering you were never as bad as you were led to believe. The individuation process for a people-pleaser involves what can be called shadow integration, consciously reclaiming the parts of yourself you've disowned. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive, it means becoming complete. Step 1 is to recognize your authentic reactions without immediately censoring them. When someone asks something of you, notice your body's initial response before your mind's people-pleasing program kicks in. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. That first response from your heart before the conditioning starts is your truth." Step 2 is learning to sit with someone else's disapproval without immediately trying to fix it. Jung understood that people-pleasers are terrified of negative emotions in themselves and in others. They become emotional managers, constantly trying to keep everyone happy. But this prevents authentic relationships because it denies others the right to their own feelings. Step 3 involves what Jung called the collision with the unconscious, the moment when your old patterns stop working and you are forced to find a new way of being. For people-pleasers, this often arrives as a crisis, burnout, an illness, or a relationship that finally demands your true self. Jung saw these crises not as failures, but as opportunities for rebirth. When your persona shatters, it creates an opening for your authentic self to finally emerge. This process is painful, but it is the pain of labor. Something real is trying to be born. When people-pleasers begin this journey of individuation, they face what can be called the resistance phase. This is when your newfound authenticity threatens the unspoken contracts that have governed your relationships for years. People will say, "You've changed," and they are right. You have stopped being who they needed you to be and started being who you actually are. Jung understood that this is threatening to those who benefited from your self-abandonment. Their resistance isn't about you becoming a worse person, it's about them losing their easy access to your compliance. The people who resist your authenticity the most are often those whose connection to you was based on power, not love. They loved your usefulness, not your essence. During this phase, you will face intense psychological pressure, guilt trips designed to pull you back into your old patterns. You'll hear phrases like, "You used to be so much nicer," or "You're being so selfish." Jung would recognize these as projections. When someone calls you selfish for setting a boundary, they are revealing their own inability to respect another's autonomy. The resistance phase is a test of your commitment. Will you retreat to the familiar comfort of people-pleasing, or will you stand firm in your authenticity even when it makes others uncomfortable? As Jung wrote, the individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. Your tribe, your family, friends, and colleagues has a vested interest in you staying the same. But those who endure this phase emerge stronger. You develop an authentic confidence, a peace with being misunderstood rather than a desperation to be liked. This doesn't mean you become cold or dismissive. It means you respond to others from a place of choice, not compulsion, from wholeness, not from a wound. Some relationships will not survive your individuation. Jung would say this is both necessary and healthy. Relationships built on the foundation of your self-abandonment were never real to begin with. They were psychological arrangements. As they fall away, something beautiful emerges, space for authentic connections based on mutual respect. Successful individuation leads to what Jung called the union of opposites. For a recovering people-pleaser, this means integrating seemingly contradictory parts of yourself. You become both kind and boundaried, both compassionate and self-protective, both generous and discerning. This creates a conscious compassion, the ability to care for others without losing yourself. You develop what Jung called an ethical relationship to the unconscious. You become aware of your triggers and can choose how to respond rather than reacting automatically. That pause between a trigger and your response is where your freedom lies. In that space, you can ask yourself, do I have the energy for this? Am I being asked because of my skill or because of my compliance? This consciousness doesn't make you cruel, it makes you real. Your help becomes a genuine gift, not a resentful obligation. This mastery phase involves what can be called boundary artistry, the ability to set limits with grace. You learn to say, I need to think about that, instead of giving an instant yes. You learn to say, I can't do that, but I can offer this instead. You learn to disappoint people without feeling like you've committed a moral failure. Most importantly, you learn to let others have their emotional reactions to your boundaries without taking responsibility for their feelings. This is a profound gift, as it allows them to relate to you as an equal, not a service provider. When you complete this journey, your entire pattern of relationships transforms. An attraction shift occurs. You stop attracting people who need to be fixed and start attracting people who appreciate authenticity. This happens because your energetic signature changes. Instead of broadcasting, I will carry your burdens, you radi, I am available for a mutual, authentic connection. Jung also warned of a period of transition loneliness. This is the gap between letting go of the old, inauthentic relationships and forming new, genuine ones. This phase can feel isolating, but it is a sacred and healing time. You learn to enjoy your own company and build a relationship with yourself, one that doesn't depend on external approval. When the new connections do arrive, they feel entirely different. There is mutual respect, emotional honesty, and support that flows in both directions. This is the human potential Jung envisioned, connections based on conscious choice, not unconscious need. The most beautiful part of this transformation is that you finally become capable of receiving the very thing you were always seeking, authentic love. But now you receive it because of who you are, not in spite of it. Your real self, boundaries, needs, and all becomes lovable because you have finally learned to love it yourself. If you're ready to start your own journey to authenticity, let me know in the comments.